And over to you, Adrian, if that's okay. You ready to go? Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Harry, and thank you to everybody for um, letting me join your meeting this evening. It's a privilege. Much looking forward to having the conversation. I've spoken with Jane beforehand. It's great that Jeff is here. Jeff is my equivalent um, from Northamptonshire. I'm from Leicestershire, but the trigger for the meeting this evening was more my career in the energy sector. If I just try to share my screen, I can just show you that one there. Hopefully everybody can see the title page. What I'll do is I'll just introduce myself, keep that fairly brief, give you a little bit of industry context, and then I'll explain the proposal that I'm making to the National Energy System Operator via a case study to make it a bit more interesting. So it's not a theoretical or an academic exercise, and then summarize the next steps as I see them. I'll try and keep it as brief as I can. I'm very mindful of the time. I've got a little clock next to me here just as a reminder, because frankly, I could speak for hours on any of these pages and would thoroughly enjoy the conversation. So I'll quite try to stay focused and not go off piste on any of this. In terms of myself, I have been the chair of CPRE Leicestershire for just over a year. But my background is in the energy sector. I left National Grid with early retirement in 2018. I still do a little bit of part-time consulting, but not very much now. But the four bullet points there just provide a very high-level summary of the things that I worked on throughout my career. Those of you who are old enough to remember will know the electricity industry was privatised back in 1990. And the way electricity was traded at that point, that's the way power stations operated and traded with the market, was considered to be inadequate by a later government. And so it was changed to be traded like any other commodity. So you can buy and sell electricity in long-term markets all the way through to present day, in principle, no different to baked beans on the shelf. I've built some of the infrastructure which historically CPRE would have objected to. I did joke when the trustees interviewed me that did they think they were putting the fox in charge of the hen house, because I am an ex-developer. I'm also very passionate about the countryside. I spend a lot of time running and walking and cycling, and putting the world to rights in my head about how the countryside could be better. So when this role of chair of CPRE Leicestershire came up, I was very keen to put my money where my mouth is. I've also been fortunate to do some work in business development. So that's linking this country with mainland Europe. There are several undersea cables now. I was involved in the early business development work about 10 years or so ago. And I spent a bit of time in New York and New England on the US system as well. And I've also been involved in some internal programs to make the industry more effective and more efficient. I won't go through the entire CV. That just gives an indication that I've been involved in some of the larger projects that the British government have initiated, and the board of directors of the PLC initiated as well. I've got a couple of quotes by way of setting the context for this from a couple of ex-colleagues. If you saw um, the bulletin that said that this meeting was on this evening, I mentioned NESO, which is a term I'll be using throughout the presentation. It's the National Energy System Operator. I was involved in establishing that about 25 years ago. It feels like 5 minutes, but it was a long time ago. One of the projects I ran was to change the way electricity is traded in the wholesale market in England and Wales. And then we did a similar thing in Scotland, and then merged the two together into a single UK system. At the time, it was known as the Great Britain System Operator, GBSO. And over the years, it's morphed into what is now known as NESO. It used to be a department within National Grid, and it's recently been nationalised. So it's still a company, but the shareholder is the government. So it's the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. Ed Miliband's department is the shareholder now. So the organisation still does what it did before, which was balancing supply and demand of electricity in real time, as well as long-term forecasts. But now, as a part of the government, it has a social obligation as well. Kate was one of my ex-colleagues, and she now runs things on a day-to-day basis. This quote is only about a week old, and the reason I particularly liked it and wanted to mention it in context is that this is UK government via NESO saying that we've got a chance to change things, that we can do it together, that we can make a difference. And the second quote was from Julian, another ex-colleague who's responsible for this program called Strategic Energy Planning. And my proposals are in the local end of the spectrum, whereas Julian is focused on national and regional. And the quote is really just showing how objective they want these plans to be. A lot of conversations about energy get very emotive very quickly. And I always want to focus this evening on the more objective side of planning our energy future. Nobody really objects to wanting cleaner air, decarbonisation. These are all very laudable aspirations, but there are very different opinions about how that could and should be done. And that's why Kate, Julian and their team are working on objective planning for the energy system for the future. From a CPRE point of view, we have, in the last few days, have published a paper called Greening the Grid. I won't go through each of these 8 points, but these are the sort of principles that we are advocating. From my point of view, as an industry veteran, all of these are perfectly reasonable, and they are, at a high level at least, very consistent with what NESO is trying to do. So it feels like, from a contextual point of view, there's a real chance here to do the right thing, to find better ways of working and actually to make it happen in the real world. So, as chair of CPRE Leicestershire, I talk to a lot of people, and every person I speak to has a unique opinion about what should or shouldn't happen when it comes to energy infrastructure. So where should solar farms be built? Where should infrastructure that supports it, the network, overhead lines, cables, etc., who should pay for it? What are the environmental issues, etc.? It's very difficult to try to figure out what might be right and what might be wrong. So what I've done for the purpose of this evening is just attempt to summarize the messages that I pick up in the conversations I've been having. So the community, whether it's individual people or groups, are very clear what they want, and they want to collaborate. They want to be a part of this. They don't want to be ignored or dismissed. Policymakers are often concerned about the lack of joined up policy from national, regional and local levels. And I know planning departments have a very difficult time trying to interpret policy and to make it work in the real world. And last but not least, industry. We tend to talk in the media, I see, about either prosperity or being responsible stewards of the environment, as if they are mutually exclusive. Whereas there are some developers who are very good at creating jobs and creating prosperity, but they do it in a responsible way. And that's something I and colleagues used to try to do when we were building the infrastructure. So this is the context of what I'm proposing to NESO. This is a summary of what the community say to me. We talk in terms of brownfield and greenfield land, so different classifications of land, and on the x-axis, the issue of land use impact. A lot of conversations are focused on we should be doing more on solar rooftops, or putting canopies on the ground around car parks, factories, etc. And what we shouldn't be doing is sacrificing permanently prime agricultural land. So the top right is considered to be preferable to the bottom left. But at the moment, the way the current planning process works, it's cheaper to go bottom left if you can find land that is close to a substation. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with going for low cost business and making profit. Profit is not a bad word. The problem is, if we are, as a country, on an island, if we sacrifice permanently our prime agricultural land, it can create all sorts of issues for the future, quite obviously. And people, when I'm talking to them, say we want clean energy. We understand why we want clean air, we want decarbonisation, but we want to look after the environment as well. Let's do it in a responsible way. So when it comes to prioritising the land, they talk in these terms of we want to build on unproductive land, go for brownfield first. And if we have to use greenfield land, use the unproductive greenfield land. Let's protect the prime agricultural land as much as possible. So if we're going to have, you just mentioned about heat pumps, if we do migrate from gas heat to electric heat, if we all drive electric cars, then there is going to be a significant increase in demand, and that will require power stations. So the general and very clear message from communities is we should be using brownfield land first, and we should be using unproductive land first. The red, amber, green tend to denote a sort of traffic light type model. So these are the 3 steps that I'm advocating, and this is based on my industry experience and what NESO are saying they're doing at the moment. I'll go through the example using it as a case study. The picture in the background is northeast Loughborough, and I'll just pick on solar power because it's quite a hot topic as part of the energy mix. The fact that you can see lots of pictures across the bottom regarding the supply from different sources of energy and how we use electricity just gives an indication of how complex this is, and we'd be here all day and all night if we were trying to deal with every aspect of supply there. So I'll use solar power as an example. So that's the land that I'm talking about in this case study. We're actually working on in the real world. It's not just for this evening's presentation. It's a real piece of work I'm working on with my colleagues. There's a lot of land in Great Britain, and trying to classify it and prioritize it is a very difficult thing to do. That's a big number. The system operator needs to have sufficient detail in order for them to balance supply and demand and to send signals to the market where power stations are going to be needed, but it does not have the resources to get into detailed land planning, and that's where I think there is a local opportunity. So this, just by way of illustration, is 1 square kilometre. The only reason for that selection is that it has a variety of land types in it. So the top left-hand side is an industrial estate, right-hand side is arable land, bottom left residential and commercial, and there's a railway station, and then the railway track in between, and a little bit of wasteland at the bottom. And just underneath the letter Q, that is a recycling plant, which coincidentally already has solar panels on its roof. This is a statement from NESO that I particularly liked when it came to looking at land planning. It was the 2 verbs in here, protect and enhance. By a lovely coincidence, just after I joined CPRE and I did a review of the strategy, we came up with 3 verbs to describe what we were trying to do to promote the countryside. So that's getting people out and about, going for walks, runs, etc., to protect it and to enhance it. So the fact that protect and enhance have appeared in the methodology for the Strategic Spatial Energy Plan, that's what SSEP stands for, is quite encouraging. That shows an alignment between NESO and CPRE. Now this slide has lots of acronyms on it. I'll give you the plain English version of what all of these are saying. If you do take an interest in this and you go online and look at websites, these are the terms that you will see being written. On the top 3 are what NESO is working on, and I'm advocating that we use local information, which are the blue ones on the right-hand side. On the top row, the one that's entitled spatial, that is NESO looking at various scenarios for how much energy the country is going to need in the future, and working out how many heat pumps are going to be needed, how many electric cars will be used, and based on that, how much electricity generation is needed, how many power stations are needed, and where would be the best place for them to be situated. A power station that isn't plugged in isn't a lot of use. So the second one, entitled network, is how do you connect all of these power stations together? So the two on the left on the top row are at the Great Britain level. Where do the power stations need to go and how do we connect them together? Then all of that will be distilled down into regional pictures, of which Northamptonshire will be in the central England zone or region, and Leicestershire is in the East Midlands. But that's where it stops. So NESO is only getting down to the regional level. So they will only be talking, from my perspective, about East Midlands. And from your perspective, it would be Central England. They're not going to be going down to this 1 kilometre level. And I think that's where the local opportunity lies, which is what I'm advocating. Now, on the right-hand side, Leicestershire is quite fortunate in that we've recently, in the last few weeks, I say we, I haven't been involved in it, but as a county, we have just completed 2 projects which are being run or led by the county council, amongst other stakeholders. The first is called the Local Area Energy Plan. That's an analysis of the land, looking at where the ideal places would be for siting power stations. And the Local Nature Recovery Strategy, nothing to do with energy at the moment, but that's looking at the different land types in terms of biodiversity, arable land, etc. And now I think there's an opportunity to take these 2 projects and to provide a really objective view of the land where these decisions are going to be made. And last but not least, well, I've called it CPRE. It's the same initials, but I'm referring to it as consent planning for regional energy. These are the steps to say, how can local people have a say in where these power stations are going to be built in future? And these are just a couple of screenshots within that 1 square kilometre. So this is output from the Local Area Energy Plan. It has lots of data in it. It's a really rich picture, quite difficult to use as a member of the community. It's really designed for sort of community energy groups, local government, the network companies, investors. It's a business and policy focused document, but it is very interesting. And I think the scope for it to be used as part of a local energy planning process where community is engaged. This screenshot in the middle, I've just filtered out a lot of the data, and it just gives an indication that in that 1 square kilometre, the dark blue on the top left is sending a clear signal that rooftop solar on that industrial estate would be a very effective way of generating the required amount of electricity. And this sort of the yellow-grey tone in the square is an assessment of suitability of the properties within that area for solar. Now, we could spend a lot of time on all of this, but I'm not going to. But this just notes that we already have, in Leicestershire, we already have this output, which across the whole of the city and county provides a really rich picture on where is a good place or a not so good place to install solar panels. Exactly the same space, but this is an output from the Local Nature Recovery Strategy, the purpose of which was different. This was to identify all the different types of land for the purposes of protecting and enhancing the natural environment. Now, I'm talking to the project managers of these 2 projects with a view to seeing how can we amalgamate this into a tool that local community can use to say, this is where we want power stations to be built, and this is where we don't want them to be built. If I just zoom into a very precise area within that 1 square kilometre, that's Loughborough Station. It's sort of self-evident that it's brownfield land because it's a station, and it's productive because it is an operational station with a car park and the rail going from left to right. If we were to use the methods that are being proposed by NESO, the first 2 lines on that table are very detailed and might be gobbledygook, frankly, and that's the nature of the beast. Unless you're involved in the industry, those acronyms on the left and some of the terminology, it's very difficult to understand. The plain English version of that is saying, if we were to look at Loughborough Station, you could say that if we were to install solar canopies over the car park or near the entrance, for example, it creates a very positive impact because the station could generate electricity for itself and for the local community, which is just across the road. But because it's an operational site, there would be constraints about where you could fit the solar, because what you don't want to do is to sacrifice the car parking spaces for the solar panels on the ground, because you'd fix one problem and create another one. So the bottom line is the plain English version. It's saying if we use the Local Area Energy Plan and the local nature recovery strategy, you can conclude that that area is productive land and it's brownfield land, which, if you recall from the 2x2 matrix, is a class 2 highlighted in. If this is where the community can start to have a role in its own area. If you were to look at that 1 square kilometre using the objective data from the 2 projects, you'd be able to classify the land and say the local priority based on this provisional assessment. So the message this is sending to policymakers in planning departments and to business is, we want you to put solar panels on the rooftops of factories. That's the top priority. Once we've done that, we could look at solar canopies on car parks, etc. What we don't want is permanent change of use of land that grows our food, which is the red number 4 on the right-hand side. That's quite a complicated one, chosen quite deliberately. Other land, of course, will be a lot easier to assess. If you go northeast, that square kilometre is productive arable land. So it's fields with hedgerows around the edge, with trees and animal habitats. Not particularly difficult to assess and to classify that land. It's fairly straightforward. Now, this third point, which was the incentivise, this is quite a challenging one. I've kept this just to 1 slide just to try to explain the basics of this. We could spend hours on this one. The energy industry works around incentives. Parts of the sector are competitive, so the suppliers that you buy your electricity from, and power station companies compete in a wholesale market. But the network companies that take the electricity from the power station to us as end users, they don't have competition. They're either a national monopoly or a regional monopoly. So in lieu of competition, they're regulated by Ofgem, and they have incentive schemes. The purpose of which is to incentivize, put financial incentives on the companies to do what society wants and to disincentivize what they don't want. The interconnection point I put in brackets, that created what is known as a cap and floor incentive for the high voltage cables that connect this country to mainland Europe. And that was the first time this type of regulatory model was used. It's been replicated in the long duration energy storage sector, which is basically big batteries. The network companies have a different regulatory model. They're all quite complicated, but the idea of any of these is to try to get industry to do what society wants. And what the picture at the bottom is suggesting, that I'm advocating, is incentives in the generation sector. Generation meaning power stations. And what this would mean is, if an organization, if a business wants to build a power station, there would be commercial incentives there to do the right thing and to not do what society doesn't want. I.e., if they say we want to permanently change the use of prime agricultural land, it's a free country. The law may entitle you to do that, but that's not what society wants. So you'll have to pay a levy for that, which will go into a pot, which would be used to fund what society does want, which is solar on rooftops and canopies, etc. If the incentive works, companies would very quickly realize they can make more money by building on brownfield, and the subsidies that would be available would be more attractive, thereby reducing the number of people who'd be in the little red triangle. And that simply means we would run out of industry money to incentivize the positive changes. So that's where the taxpayer has to come in. So there is a potential taxpayer obligation in this. All I wanted to do this evening was just to indicate that incentives form quite a significant part of the way the industry works. So this is a summary of everything I've been saying, which is that we need to classify and prioritize the land, which is the X and the Y axis and the photographs. And the signal that this sends to the community is the model is there to deliver what you want, which is, we want clean energy. We want to look after the environment. Policymakers get an enhanced toolkit rather than these major changes in energy, making it even more difficult for them to do their job. And industry gets a very clear signal. You can make a lot of money by installing rooftop solar, and you can make less money by permanently destroying agricultural land. The subtlety, which might not be obvious in the bottom left there, is that what we don't want, what society doesn't want, is fields that are growing crops like that to be destroyed. But if you were to be innovative and use what is known as agri-PV, which is a technical term for basically the rooftops of greenhouses, you can put glass solar panels over fields, thereby not sacrificing the land for its arable capability. The farmer can maintain crop production and revenue from it, can get revenue from solar on canopies, and can have free electricity for the farm. So there are subtleties in an incentive scheme, but the message is clear: build on brownfield first, build on greenfield only if we have to. So hypothetically, if that model were live now and it were operational, it isn't. I stress that none of what I've said has any official standing anywhere at all at the moment. It's simply an idea that I've had based on what I've heard and from what I knew occurred in the industry. And I thought there's an opportunity here to extend the way parts of the industry work into these challenges that we face now. So, but if I were a planning officer looking at, hypothetically, looking at 11 projects in that 1 square kilometre, the sequencing would be as per the 1 to 11, i.e. 1, 2 and 3 would be approved very quickly because they're rooftops in different environments. 4 to 7 would probably be approved as well because there's a low impact on land. 8 and 9 are the two that are the most controversial. Number 9 is what most people get really upset about. That's the one that says this field used to have crops growing in it. They are going to disappear, and they're going to be replaced by solar panels. And that is where this approach would disincentivize that. But if a developer is saying there's a real opportunity here in that space for solar, if they are innovative, so more like number 8 than number 9, then there's potential for that to be funded potentially by the taxpayer. And the two at the bottom are some people think they're silly, but they are still land. That number 10 is a picture of Queen's Park in Loughborough, which has got some nice walks. There's a children's playground, and in theory, that could be a good place to install solar panels on the ground. Obviously, there will be outrage if that were to occur because it's a very beautiful place. Similarly, number 11 is a football pitch. Potentially a great place to put solar if you are only interested in the business aspect of it or balancing the network. But of course, there would be a great deal of objection to stopping that happening. So 9, 10 and 11 are what people are quoting to me and to others when they're saying, we want this to be done responsibly. We want you to build the kit between numbers 1 and number 8, and they're the things that should be getting the approval. 9, 10 and 11 should either be rejected, or if they have to be consented, there should come with a levy where the funding of that would then go back to fund items 1 to 8 in other areas. So that was just 1 kilometre. Leicestershire has 2,100 of them, 1.1 million people. I think Northamptonshire is slightly bigger, about 2,400 square kilometres, and according to the census, 750,000 people in 2021. So slightly bigger land, slightly fewer people, but the principles are the same. The local people need to have a say in this. This is a major change that's happening. There is a big change happening over the next 2 years or so, and it either happens to the community or it can happen for us, and that requires us to get engaged in looking at land definition using objective data. So at a very practical level, this is what I'm working on with colleagues. Left hand side, the Loughborough case study is being turned into like a project brief, if you will, so it can be repeated. So it's the sort of thing that could happen anywhere. It would simply be saying, this is how to classify local land, this is how to prioritise it, and these are the incentives that we would want to be in place in that area. I'm talking with some borough councillors and parish councillors to see about piloting this next year so that we can do a land area map in one borough. and then that would then be amalgamated into a county level view. And obviously this would be possible in any part of the country, not just Leicestershire. And then items 5 and 6, that's almost coming the other way. That's what NISO is working on. They are developing that national plan, cascading it into a regional plan. The acronyms over on the right-hand side, the Regional Energy Strategic Plan, of which there are 3, you'll see that's a map of Leicestershire with Northamptonshire bottom right. So we, in this county, are going to need to work with Northamptonshire as part of Central England region, and with Warwickshire as part of the West Midlands. So these things are quite complex, quite difficult, and quite time consuming. But if we, the people, do not get involved in this, it will happen to us. The option of do nothing isn't credible. We have to either participate or decisions will be made for us elsewhere. And I think there's a really positive opportunity here to start to democratise the process. Now, so where are we across the country on those 2 data sources? It's early days. So the local area energy plans, picture on the left, is showing the different statuses of the work in different parts of the country. You'll see there's quite a lot of white or grey where it hasn't really started. The Leicestershire one has actually just completed, so that picture's slightly out of date now, by about a week. But you can see it's quite patchy. And on the right-hand side, they're the local nature recovery strategy areas. It's slightly different on the right. You'll see, obviously, that's just England. The approach is very similar in Scotland and Wales, but they tend to have local nature reserves. Their policies are slightly different, and that's something that NISO are working on. So you can see this is very early days. From a Northamptonshire point of view, North Northamptonshire has an LNRS, a local nature recovery strategy, and it's in progress when looking at the local area energy plan. West Northamptonshire doesn't. Based on this information, you feel free to correct me if this is out of date. So it's quite early days on this. This is going to take 2 to 3 years to make this happen. So this discussion this evening is a very early conversation about this, but this data is objective. So when it comes to making decisions, we will be able to make much more objective decisions rather than it simply being who shouts loudest or the so-called NIMBY arguments. Now, this timeline, very high level, it's just indicative that if I look at the strategic energy plan timeline that NISO has produced, they're looking by the end of 2027 into 28 to have the first strategic energy plan for the whole country agreed and deployed. I did read something today, coincidentally, that suggested that the government have identified more accurate costing data for electricity generation. So NISO is going to work on that, and it could delay this timeline by a few months. They're looking at that. I'm not involved in it anymore. But the idea of this approach that I'm advocating locally is once the regional methodology has been agreed, NISO is consulting on that as we speak. Their consultation period concludes mid-January, I think. But once that's clear how these regional plans are going to be developed, I'm looking to use the case study that I've done in Loughborough to work with parishes and boroughs to create a really rich picture that local people can use. And NISO next year wants to formalise the way regional governance works for all of this. So how do counties work? How would Leicestershire work with Northamptonshire between regions? How do individual counties work? And that's really the target for next year, with the view to the year after really starting to develop these regional and local plans such that it all comes together as a well-oiled machine in 2028. And that's when the policy decisions would be made in a consistent way across the country. And in theory, we would be getting what everybody wants, which is local involvement. Policymakers would have an improved toolkit on which they can make their policy decisions, and businesses would have a very clear incentive. So I'm just summarising this slide now before I drew it up. On the left-hand side, the 3 circles at the top, that's happening. That's happening now. Clean Power 2030 is the policy from the government. Ofgem is setting up the price controls. That's more jargon on the left. The RIIO T3 simply means how does the high voltage network company, which is National Grid Electricity Transmission, make its money in over the next for sort of 5 to 10 years. RIIO ED3 it's electricity distribution 3. That's the low voltage network. And in the East Midlands, that's National Grid Electricity Distribution, but there are multiple companies around the country. RIIO is just the name of the price control. It stands for revenue equals incentives plus innovation plus outputs, which basically means if you do your job and you do it well and you try new things and get better, then you can make lots of money. That's the headline for it. And what I'm advocating is the blue box at the bottom, the blue circle, so that we should use objective data from the energy plan and the local nature recovery strategy, plus what local people know about their area, get them involved in this process. And if we do, community won't be seeing this as something that's a problem. We will have been involved. We will have been the architects. So we will be more supportive as a community in these changes that are happening. And hopefully there will be less or fewer issues that come out of the planning process, because local people will have had a say in how land is classified and what the priorities are for the locations. So bringing this to a close, that is the case study space. That's Loughborough Station at the moment. If this model were to be put in place with the help of an AI prompt, might it look something like that in 2030? Is it possible that we could have solar canopies? So when you come out of the train station and somebody's coming to pick you up, you're standing under a canopy and staying dry. Perhaps those canopies could extend over the car park as well. And there might be, instead of it being a 5-megawatt site, it could be a 30-megawatt site. And the point is, if you have solar panels in places like that, the agricultural land about half a mile away would be retained. The substation that this would connect to is actually just behind the industrial complex. If you see the building in the background behind the title, there's a 33 kilovolt substation the other side of that factory. So this would be very easy, relatively speaking, to install because of the proximity to the substation, the existing cabling. Some additional work would be needed, of course, but it wouldn't be gutting fields of agricultural land. So that brings my presentation to an end. I'll leave that up for a moment. If you've got a phone, you can point at the QR code. That will take you to the CPRE Leicestershire website. We do have some social media presence. It's a bit out of date at the moment, but I've just appointed a marketing manager who's hopefully going to be bringing that up to date. And a lot of this energy stuff will be going on the website in due course. I just need to turn my ideas into something that NESO are comfortable with from a top-down perspective, and to work with sort of colleagues around the county and people like yourselves to see, could we take this forward to engage the community? But there's real potential here. The projects that I worked on during my career were substantial because they were implementing major change in the energy sector. This is of the same ilk, possibly bigger, actually, as I mentioned to some of the NESO team, because this is an opportunity to engage people. When we were changing the way power stations work, it was very much an industry project, whereas this is the chance now to really start to democratize energy and get people involved in the process, and not just them having to be people who are objecting when a new power station is proposed. Social media is full of it. Here's a new solar farm. Article, commentary underneath. Why are we doing it here? This should be over on rooftops. This shouldn't be there. And there's lots of post-event complaining about these developments, perfectly reasonably so. But this is a chance to put up or shut up, if you will. This is a chance for the community to get involved. The enthusiasm I've had from local people here has been tangible, actually. It's been really great. Communities wanting to get involved. Borough and parish councillors saying, how can we do this? How can we make it real? And businesses saying, we want to be responsible developers. I'm talking with a solar farm company at the moment. They've got really strong commitment to the environment, and as well as wanting to object to what I consider irresponsible development, I'm really keen to sing the praises of organisations that are responsible stewards. So I will stop the sharing. There we go. So it was a bit longer than I was hoping for, but there is still time. So it's over to you for questions. I haven't looked at the chat whilst I've been talking. I've been too busy clicking on my computer. So I don't know if somebody could read the questions out and see how much time we've got left.
We've got quite a lot of questions. Are you going to run through those, Harry, or me? How are we going to play this? You're on mute.
Jane, you do it.
Okay, all right, cool.
I'm
Thank you.
clearly confident.
We have got lots and lots of comments, which I think is really positive because it obviously has provoked a great deal of thinking and a great deal of questions. So I'm going to go through them in order. So it's a question from David Garlick. Why do first developers on an estate have to pay for the infrastructure for the whole estate? I'm not sure if that's completely relevant to what you're talking about, but I can't hear you.
Well, I don't know obviously the basis of the question, but there is a relevance to that. I'm not sure about an estate per se. It's that if the network is at capacity in a particular area, and somebody new comes along and they want to plug in their new power station, if the power station and the network if the network does not have capacity, if the substation is saying, sorry, we're full, and the network needs to have more work done on it to accommodate this extra supply, so that could be another transformer, it could be thicker cables, whatever, that incremental cost has to be borne by the new connectee. Now, the new connectees say, why should I pay for all of that? But the existing connectees are saying, well, we're already paying for our service, why should we pay for you to come onto the network? There's a whole debate about what is right and wrong for charging. That's just the way it is at the moment, that anybody coming onto a network that is at capacity has to pay for the reinforcement, as it's known, and that can cost a fortune. That can be, if you get into transmission level reinforcement, which is bigger wires on the 400,000 volt network, that can run into millions. It's a substantial change, because if a new company builds a power station, connects, everything needs to be remodeled, because these are electrons, not baked beans. So everything has to balance all the time. Supply and demand have to balance, otherwise you have power cuts and you do the equivalent of your fuse box tripping. So lots of modeling has to happen on the network to say, if this new power station comes on, what's the impact going to be on everybody else who's already there? And the view is it's the new person that has caused the change, therefore they have to pay for it. Whether you agree with that or not is a whole different issue.
But that's how it is, and that's the reasoning behind it at the moment. So that's helpful. Yes. Thank you. Just a quick comment also from David Garlick to say that Northampton Town Football Club have installed solar on their stand roof. So I think that's exactly the sort of thing that most people would be applauding.
Yes.
Martin asks, can I install a ground-mounted solar array in my large south-facing back garden? His roof is already full.
Can I just sort of generalise that more?
Sure.
Did that as an example, but I mean, there's as Stuart said, there's very limited sort of things you can do without getting planning consent. But I'm not a gardener. I'm quite happy to convert it to a wildflower meadow. And you didn't mention sort of domestic use. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, my garden is unproductive apart from giving me exercise mowing the lawn. And I say I'm not a gardener, so I'd be quite happy to fill it with solar panels and graze a few sheep or something.
Yeah, there's a couple of points. One is if it's what's known as behind the meter, in other words, domestic. So if you have solar on your rooftop, if you don't export excess electricity onto the grid, then the grid doesn't care. It's you generate it on your rooftop and you use it. That's fine. And the arrangements for having the authorization, that's just a planning consent, like doing anything else on your house. The amount of electricity that one individual household produces is trivial on the grand scheme of things. So it doesn't make any difference. So generally the network owners are not that bothered by one company doing something, even if you export your excess generation into the grid. And I think the other was the point, I saw something on the chat as well about these things not mutually exclusive. That's why we have I'm proposing the prioritisation, that if we use all the brownfield and there's none left, but the demand is higher and you have to use greenfield, you can have pollinator friendly habitats surrounding the solar panels. I mentioned I did some work in the US. There's a fantastic place in Vermont, which officially was a solar farm that happened to have some plants on it. But when you looked at it, you'd go, this is the most beautiful landscape that happens to have some solar panels in it. So there is an opportunity to reinstate the land from a natural point of view, from what's sometimes called biodiversity net gain. But we shouldn't be doing that before we've exhausted supply of the rooftops. But the domestic level one, that really hasn't been the focus of my presentation. You're quite right. This has been more focused on Great Britain level, coming down to the regions, and then how do we meet them? How does the bottom up meet the top down?
Yeah. Okay. A question from Stuart about how much prime agricultural land has actually been consumed by solar farms. So I guess the question there is, in a way, is that really the biggest issue? Is that actually the perception? Perhaps because there isn't a lot of communication and engagement with communities at the moment. So people's tendency is simply to go, I don't want it, without necessarily.
I don't have any metrics on that, to be honest. I'd have to go and investigate that. What I do know is the land, there's the agricultural land classification of grades 1 to 5, where grade 1 is the prime land and grade 5 is arable, pasture land. There isn't a great deal of class 1 and class 2 in Leicestershire. The local area energy plan I showed earlier with the assessment of the land, that includes, one of the filters is agricultural land classification. So you can look at the county and see, this is where the prime land is, this is where the land for sort of grazing sheep on is, for example. But what I don't have a metric on it, to be honest. I'd have to go and check that one.
Thank you. That's right. That's fine. We don't expect you to know absolutely everything, although you do seem to know a great deal. So then another question from Stuart about energy market pricing. Would that need to be reformed for this model to work?
Good question. That's almost a subject for a whole other presentation. There are two things here. One, there's two projects that are being undertaken by the government at the moment. One is known as REMA, which is the Review of Electricity Market Arrangements, and that's where the market pricing model is being considered. And the other is known as Connections Reform, and that's the rather crazy situation that a country that has capacity of 75 gigawatts. Don't worry about the technical stuff there. 75 is the number that matters. We have a queue of power stations wanting to connect of just shy of 800 gigawatts. So businesses wanting to connect onto the network, there are 10 times as much capacity in that queue as the country needs at the moment. And even if you have the highest level of electricity demand in the future, where we all drive electric cars, we all have electric heat pumps, even that's only going to be going into the 200 gigawatts. So there's a huge issue at the moment about fundamentally how do we price in the wholesale market and how do you prioritize power stations onto the network, because companies coming into the industry now, new entrants who don't understand the industry get rather shocked when they say your connection agreement is 10 years away as opposed to 10 weeks away. You cannot just go and build a power station, stand there with your plug and think you can just plug it into the network. It's a very complex and expensive process. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer in terms of what the impact will be, but it is being considered by the government at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Hillary's put a comment in about the different descriptions of agricultural land, but I think you've kind of answered that because you've just talked about the different classifications that we can look at.
Yeah, it's the if you Google ALC, agricultural land classification.
Yeah.
I think if I could just
expand on it, Hillary,
because I put the question up because somebody asked about prime land, and that was, I don't know much about it, but is prime land the only one that's really protected, and all the other 4 classifications are not so protected?
No,
Because
yeah, that's a very reasonable question. If you saw, I showed it as a 2x2 matrix simply because it's easier to understand. The reality is there's a continuum, there's a scale, but if I had shown it as like 10 steps, 10 by 10, it's 100 options, and all of a sudden it becomes overwhelming. But I'm not even sure productive, unproductive are the right words. It could be more amenity or sort of value to society. So beautiful countryside that does not make money is no less valuable, even if it doesn't make money. It's very, very important and significant to society. So my quick answer is the model I showed for the purposes of a presentation could be seen as overly simplistic.
Yeah, I think I was really really looking only at agricultural land, because of course there's a lot of agricultural land which presumably isn't considered prime. So is there less protection for that agricultural land? I mean, if prime land, my question was, is prime land what it is used for food production or could be used for food production? Because if it, as I said on the chat, if it is used for food production, you could see a scenario where it might be worth farmers' while to stop using it for food production for a few years, and then that would sort of avoid lots of objections when they want to build a solar farm. I mean, that's cynical, but what are the protections for all agricultural land, not just prime?
Well, I perhaps should say I use the word prime purely as an adjective to describe it. It's not an official terminology. I just meant the top of the queue. There's a 5-grade scale. It's actually 6 because the middle one, 3, has 2 parts to it. I'm not quite sure why it doesn't just go 1 to 6, but anyway, it's a scale where number 1 is the most productive land. So that's the one where you can grow whether it's I'm not a farmer, as you could probably tell, but you can grow the best crops, best quality, broadest variety of crops. When you get to grade 3, again, my understanding is that is the quality of the land is such that you're getting into more sort of beets and animal stock, different types of crops. Then you're not going to get the best cabbages, lettuces, carrots, etc., from that type of land. And by the time you get to grade 5, that's not really for growing. That's more for grazing sheep and cattle. But as you can probably gather from my stumbling, it's not my area of expertise. I just know there is a scale. Number 1 is the most protected. Number 5 is the least. And in the local area energy plan, it has been classified, and I don't know the basis of the decision, but they are highlighting 1 to 3 as needing protecting, 4 or 5 not needing protecting or not needing the same level of protections. In other words, if it's land that is being used for grazing, that would be less likely to be rejected compared to one that's growing critical crops.
I mean, this has a huge significance. I don't want to take on, but there's huge significance for a village like where I live, where we are surrounded by farms, but of all different usages. And if 90% of the land doesn't fall within 1 to 3, then it's an open market for solar farms surrounding us rather than lovely fields. But anyway, that's just a point.
Just to sort of close that for a minute, Jeff has put quite a helpful comment into the chat, which is to say that best and most versatile is a better term for classes 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to bring Rupert in now, who's been sitting there very patiently with his hand up. May have something to say.
Yes, as an ex-farmer, there are farming classifications, certainly, and class 1 is going to grow your prime wheat or your vegetables or best fruit, and the worst might be scrub land or low-grade forestry. But that's not. There's also landscape value and other things brought into this, I imagine, and I don't know. Since I was a farmer, it's obviously changed. But that wasn't what I wanted to say, Adrian. I was very glad to meet you when we had lunch together, and I suggested that you should come along and talk to us. And fantastic, thank you very much indeed. So that's been great. My question is, who did the work in Leicestershire, and who would do it in West Northamptonshire to get to what you've got to? Who do we employ? Who
Hmm.
employs somebody to do something?
Well, my understanding of what's happening in Northamptonshire by doing nothing more than Googling was that, I mean, Jeff may be able to help on this, but I understand that the local nature recovery strategy has been completed in North. I don't think there's anything of either of the two projects. I don't think either of them existing in West Northamptonshire. In North, I understand the local nature recovery strategy has been completed, and the council have gone out to tender for somebody to build the local area energy plan. That was 3 or 4 months ago. But I was going to say at the beginning, I forgot part of my introduction. I'm happy that this might, if you're interested, is part one. And if you want to speak again outside of sort of this forum about what the Northamptonshire next steps could be, very happy to talk. I'll certainly be speaking with Jeff, my counterpart, about what CPRE could do, but very happy to broaden that engagement about those points of how does Northamptonshire do this. I'm having similar conversations with Warwickshire at the moment, because south west of Leicestershire is Warwickshire. So my equivalents and mine and Jeff's equivalents in Rutland, Lincolnshire, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, we all need to do the same sort of thing. I don't want to set hairs running on this. This is a 2 to 3 year piece of work here. This is a sort of thing that, had we not had this conversation, Rupert, had you and I not met, we weren't talking about this, you may not even hear about this for another couple of years. So there's no rush in that sense, but that's why I'm pushing things now. So we're not rushing, but we can stay ahead of the game.
It's definitely something Corn can be doing, is chivying along from behind, but it's not something we can actually do. But we can chase the people who are going to do it.
And we can put people in touch, can't we? I think this is one of the prime functions that groups like ours can do, is put the people who are interested in how this happens on the ground with people who've got the expertise to make things happen, which I think is where the next steps piece would be really, really interesting. Because I think one of the things that I found I think is really important about what you were saying, Adrian, is that this is about engaging people and talking to people, and that's really difficult. So you have to work hard at that, because we've had a lot of experience in this country of tick box consultation questionnaires that nobody can really understand and don't really engage people. And so understanding how you could get that level of interest and engagement would be really important, I think.
Well, yes, on one of the slides, you may have noticed it said delegated partnerships, but they weren't just random words. What that meant was not just a consultation. That a consultation can be seen as you say, a tick box exercise where a decision has already been made, but there's a nominal gesture to say to the community, what do you think? What I'm advocating is something more formal than that says, from NESO, this is how far down we're going, and we are now going to delegate into county council, city councils to take the next steps forward. So the Leicestershire, the local area energy plan here was, if I get this right, it was the county and city council with the Energy Systems Catapult, which is one of the a government expert organisation, 2 of the local universities, and a couple of community energy groups. It was funded by Innovate UK. There was a £60 million budget, so part of that would be for Northamptonshire. There was £3 million for the Leicestershire project, and I'm a firm believer in not reinventing the wheel. So, as well as telling the project managers I've just been speaking to what a great job they've done, because I think it's superb. It really is an interesting tool that they've created. So other counties don't need to go off and start again. Why don't Leicestershire and the other counties that have got this work completed sort of share it, so you can, in simple terms, cut and paste, get local data for Northamptonshire, but use the same software.
If they were a private company, they 100% would, wouldn't they? Because why wouldn't you?
Exactly. Exactly. But most of the work is led by the county council. If you wanted to put one organisation in the sort of first place, but it's very much a multiple stakeholder working together in a project over time. But it's that level that's needed. The local part is it's corralling people. Without going into too many details, one of the reasons I'm talking to Melton Borough Council. I was contacted a long time ago about a new solar farm that was being proposed near a tiny little village called Freeby, just to the east of Melton. It's barely even a village; it's a handful of houses, and they were going to get a 50 megawatt, which is a very big solar farm. And then there's two more that might be coming as well. It's just like the story you just mentioned, Jane, of a village, or it wasn't Jane. So somebody
Hillary was saying
Hillary, yeah. So like there's a village, and you might be surrounded by solar farms because they're the easiest placed and the cheapest place to do it. The Freeby people were quite concerned. I went to one of their parish councils. The borough councillor was there, said, "Can we have a chat?" Been talking with him, been talking with the chief exec of Melton Borough Council and the MP, which is Ed Arger, used to be in the shadow cabinet. And there's a real desire to do something, but quite often it's, have we got the money? Have we got the resources? Have we got the time? Have we got the people? And these people are very, 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 very busy, which is why I'm saying if we were to use the local area energy plan, which has been done, completed, and the local nature recovery strategy, borough councils don't need to go off and do lots of analysis, engaging consultants, spending lots of money. And we've got the data. And if I can go bottom up and get one of the parishes to do that land mapping thing I did in that 1 square kilometre, where you say your parish has 20 square kilometres, I could run a couple of workshops with them in an evening. Here's the data, draw some lines on these boxes. It's like pin the tail on the donkey almost. It's here are the lines. That information can form the basis of draft 1 of your local area map for this parish. Do the same thing a few times next year. You've got your borough map. Do the same thing the following year. There's your county map. So the point of that is that these things take time, and you cannot simply top down say to mandate you must do this locally and expect it to happen quickly, because it won't. No. County councils and borough councils, they're so busy with so much on their agenda. Although they'd love to participate in what I'm saying, the pushback is frequently, I haven't got the time, I've got other priorities. If I do this, what have I got to stop? Because everybody's very busy. So I personally am just trying to figure out, how can we be innovative on this? How can we use what we've already got? That's why Leicestershire has that advantage, because we've got those two projects that have just completed. But because with that information in place, I can go and work with parishes and create this local area map quite quickly, because the data's there. So what I'm actually advocating to the project managers is there any way, if you've got the funding, for your two projects to work together, to say, let's combine all of that data and produce a draft area map based on what the community wants, and then use parishes and boroughs to review the output. And all of a sudden, that's a bit easier. It's easier to review a document that says, do you agree with this, than it is to write it in the first place. And that project has already got funding. That's the Innovate UK 60 million for the country. But because it's being run the way it is, I'm sure they have good reasons, it isn't being mandated to all of the councils, you will do this and you'll do it by this point. It appears to be optional, that you can tap into the resourcing and the funding if you want it. And as you saw from those two maps of the country, some have really pushed ahead with it, and some haven't, for their own good reasons. I'm sure.
And just to fill in on that, I think a lot of people here will be aware that the local nature recovery strategy for West Northamptonshire is currently sitting in a draft version with DEFRA, I believe, and due to come out for consultation at the beginning of next year. Until I spoke to you, I had never heard of a local area energy plan, so I'd be really surprised if they're doing anything on that. But you never know. And just
when I talked to NISO, one of their teams is the regional, what was RESP, Regional Energy Strategic Plan. They have teams for each of the regions. And again, this is all very low profile, which is why you won't have heard of it yet. It's the industry trying to figure out what's it going to do. Because just to be clear, this idea of national, regional, local planning has never been done anywhere in the world. This is UK PLC leading the way, and that's why there's a lot of head scratching going, how do we do this? So
it seems to make a lot of sense.
There is a regional team. There is a regional team for Central England, which would include your good selves. I can certainly find the contacts for you quite easily, if that would help.
It might do. I mean, that is. it does seem like a really obvious thing to do, is that people are busy working away with the stuff that's going to come down from the top, and what you're doing is building something at the bottom for it to bump into, instead of it just. Of course, one of the things which people complain about that takes a lot of time when you're wanting to develop infrastructure of all sorts is that you get appeals, you get people objecting, you get all this. Whereas if you have people already bought into the idea that they need to have something somewhere and this is where they'd like it as opposed to over here, you might cut out some of that legal processes.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I'm advocating having the local area map, because if you get people involved at the beginning of a process, they're much more inclined to agree to it.
Definitely.
The way things work at the moment is something comes along, never heard of it, don't like that, object.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Totally.
That's understandable. But it's a bit, in terms of CPRE as well, I'm advocating not just waiting for these schemes to come along and review them. It's get involved with the policymakers, with the influencers, with the companies, talk to them in advance. Just as an ex-developer, I knew that if an organisation came to us in the very early days, it was like the door was wide open. Come in, talk to us. Let's find out what's wanted. And then when you go public with the project, you have allies rather than enemies and people saying, we don't want this, you've not thought about us. And also, if we use energy as a catalyst to create this thing I've christened a local area map, it isn't just substations, it can be housing, railways, roads, all infrastructure, because then it's the community owned map of their area, where there are not just the objective data from those projects, but there's local insight, people who know their village, they know there are special sites that, it might not be a site of special scientific interest as in formally designated, but local people have that knowledge of their area, of what's important and what's not. And if they get a chance to classify the land and prioritise it, it makes life a lot easier for the planning officers to say, this is what we're advocating. We're going to approve this scheme because it's what the businesses want, but it also aligns with the local area map, which is owned by the community. So in theory, by having the local area map developed by the community, for the community, that's consistent with those top-down plans, in theory, you've got less conflict to have to deal with.
Yeah, definitely. Which is what So we're getting very close to the 9 o'clock point. So I'm just going to very quickly read out a question that Helen has put in, which is about government buildings, schools, prisons, authorities, police stations. Will the government be investing in upgrading this sector? It feels to me like that fits into one of your categories and ought to be developed along those lines. Is that?
Yeah, that would be. I can't answer the question precisely because I don't know what the government is doing, but from my perspective, they are rooftops.
Yes. Yeah.
Regardless of what happens under the rooftop, they are productive brownfield land, as in they are doing something useful for society, and they're not the countryside. Therefore, they are productive and they are brownfield. So, in theory, any of those buildings could be used for rooftop solar. And indeed, the car parks they may have next to them could have canopies on them. So there's definitely, technically, it's academic what they're used for. But I think that gets into national and local politics and policies of whether governments and local authorities want to use those buildings. But from a point of view of energy supply and prioritise land use, they would be great places to use.
Yes, it seems like a really. And I think the one of those institutions that I know the most about as a former school governor is schools, and I know a lot of schools would be really happy to have solar put on, but they don't have the money to do it, and they don't have the resources to look into a project to raise money to do it. So they're just sort of sitting there hoping someone else will sort it out for them, I think. I don't want to keep people too much past 9 o'clock, so I'm just going to say a big thank you to Adrian for coming and talking to us about this. I mean, I think this is really groundbreaking, interesting stuff that I think we will follow with a great deal of interest, and definitely I think we would like to sort of talk about next steps at some future point. Does anybody have any burning questions that they want to ask before we let Adrian go? There will be a recording of the meeting up on YouTube once it's okay to do that, and obviously there'll be meeting notes out as normal as well.
I would just say thank you very much for your time. I'm very happy to follow up with any conversations, either as a group or if you want to reach out to me one-to-one, that's sort of fine as well. And as you've hopefully realised, it's very early days in this process, sort of brave new world, lots of more questions than answers at the moment, but I'm trying to sort of forge a direction that says this is the right thing to do. And we've now just got to roll with the punches and try to make it happen.
Yeah, sounds absolutely
Very happy
brilliant.
to follow up. And I'll certainly be talking with Jeff about the alignment between us.
Yes.
Excellent. Very glad to hear that. Is there anything that we need to mention by way of sort of parish notices, Harry, before we let people go? Or
just that we won't be meeting in December.
No, that's right.
We are planning a face-to-face gathering in the downstairs cafe at the museum the last Saturday or the penultimate Saturday in January, but that will be shared in Corn Exchange. And there is a theatre production tomorrow night at the Derngate, Royal and Derngate, that I'm going to, and the information about that's on what's on in Corn Exchange. So if anybody's going, I'll see you there. And thank you, Andrew, for answering the question about the land use, the amount of land that 0.7 to 0. Whatever it was does seem very
quite
trivial.
Right. 0.06 to 0.07 solar farms.
But it doesn't explain whether it's prime or whatever the other expression might be. Anyway, thank you all very much for coming along. Thank you, Jane, for stepping in with my muteness.
No, thank you so much to everybody for coming, especially thanks to Adrian. It's been absolutely fascinating.
Really excellent.
Yes, really, really interesting, and we're very grateful to you. And we'll see you all in January, if not before.
Good.
Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.